Hello, I'm Brother Lewis Montgomery. I am currently the historian for Kappa Phi Lambda. It is my great pleasure today to interview Brother Charles Franklin. Brother Franklin, how are you doing today?
Doing great. This is all good.
Fantastic. You've got a wonderful setup there. I love your sweater and the background. It's really very a beautiful presentation. So thank you for setting this up.
This is special for me, and like I said, I've had very few occasions since acquiring this sweater, and
Yes.
I thought it'd be great for this presentation today.
Sure, absolutely. We want to learn all about it. So, Brother Franklin, if you don't mind telling us, where are you from originally?
I'm from a little town called Overland Gardens in Pennsylvania, which is about 2 miles outside of Steelton, Pennsylvania, which is originally my home as a Franklin. Okay. And that's right outside of about 5 miles or 6 miles outside of Harrisburg.
Okay, got it. All right, so Western PA, got it.
Oh no, Eastern
PA. That's right. Harrisburg is Eastern, Pittsburgh is Western. Got it. Okay, good. Yeah. So, and where did you go to college?
Well, that's the story. But when come time to go away to think about colleges, I knew I had to go to a big city school, and my applications were all either to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Washington D.C. Area, or Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh to me was a super big. I'm from a small town in Pennsylvania, and I thought I'd find a. So my originally started out at Duquesne University. Okay. In 1965, and my major was actually selected early on. I decided I wanted to be a pharmacist. So Pennsylvania is rather unique in that it has 4 schools of pharmacy, and I applied to again Temple, Philadelphia College of Pharmacy and Science, Duquesne University, but I didn't think I could do Pitt because that was too big time. His reputation was, and it cost more. Sure. That's why I ended up at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh.
Okay, all right, very good. So to be a pharmacist, I mean, that's and he said this is 1965. I can't imagine there were a lot of Black pharmacists. Why, of all possible things, did you choose that as an area that you wanted to pursue?
Well, it kind of goes back to my origins or my history in my life. I go from the get-go. I was raised in Steelton, Pennsylvania originally. And as such, my parents chose to make their home there in Steelton. And I didn't realize it at the time, but there was this thing called the Great Migration. Okay. Sure. And now you'll find out throughout my time in this discussion that I'm a proud brother of the 60s. The 60s was a tumultuous time, a time of change. Sure. In this world, in my world specifically, but like I say, growing up I was originally starting in Steelton, and I learned what community was because we lived up on this hill, Lincoln Street in Steelton, Pennsylvania, and it turns out my world was most of the neighbors on both sides of the street of Lincoln Street, which were all Black. This was not a significant issue to me at the time. And again, my neighbor right immediately across the street was white. But I knew all my neighbors. I knew everybody on the street on our top of the hill. So that's where I got my first sense of community. Got it. And that feeling actually carried over throughout much of my time. So, but earlier on in that community, it became clear that when it came time for me to go to school, my parents recognized that my choice was what was known as hygienic school, which was an all-Black school. And again, this was not relevant to me at the time. I had no idea, but they knew that education opportunities should not be limited by my race, and it was their choice to actually convert to Catholicism. They were mostly devotedly Baptist, Southern Baptist, as it turns out.
Sure.
They thought we would go to a parochial school, a Catholic school. So they converted when I was probably about 4 years old.
Okay.
So that my brother and I have an older brother. He's 17 months older than me. We grew up together. We did everything together, and we were all under tutelage of my father, who was, again, I had no clue what a role model was, but I did know that I could look at people and recognize what I wanted to be or what I was like to be. Hold on, bear 1 second.
Okay, we're good.
You back?
Yeah.
Let me see.
Okay, so we were talking about Duquesne and your career choice.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, the choice came. I would recognize my elders. I have a great affinity to my elders, even starting back then. And like I said, this was on the top of a hill in Stilton. And we would always go down the hill to the barber shop, to the store, the grocery store. And one of them down next to my barber shop was a distant relative.
Okay.
But Mr. Blue was a key problem. But he would get visits from periodically, and the barbershops back in the 60s or 50s, late 50s and 60s was a bit different. I mean, that was a community center.
Sure.
Especially amongst Black males, we got a chance to see what life was about in our community. And one of the guys that kept coming over to visit him was the pharmacist. We called him a druggist then.
Okay, sure.
Which was 2 doors down. And I didn't understand why he was a regular. He would just pop in and pop out on a regular, but he would pop in for a reason. And it turns out, back in the days, and I pride myself on that this level of history. Back in the day, barbershops were the purveyors or the keepers of leeches. You know, are you familiar with this subject?
You say leeches?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah, I'm familiar with leeches, but I'm not
they
sure.
Had these burned your jars. Well, it turns out the barbers, Mr. Blue, said, well, why am I keeping these all the time? Why don't we just let the pharmacists keep them at the pharmacy? Because that's where people go to get them. So, and he would send them over to the barbershop. Well, I said, well, it worked out that he turned the crew over to them. And I said, well, why do people go to pharmacies? Because I didn't. You'll find this again. I've never really been sick. I haven't been around anybody who's been sick, and my father prides himself in keeping us all healthy and all that. Well, I come to know that learned of the barber and gone over there. I says, well, he was like the town council. I mean, people would go visit him when you had the slightest ailment or whatnot, even before going to the doctor, because the doctor was a cost.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
So he was a community leader as well as the barbershop. So as I grew up, I had a full appreciation, and that's how I came to see. Well, I wanted to be a consultant. I wanted to be my town expert on something. Okay. And the choices were kind of limited, but I'd say at least these guys had roles in the community beyond just being. Stilton is a blue collar town. Stilton is the home of Bethlehem Steel.
Okay.
Bethlehem Steel, the steel mill. This is the main reason why the migration occurred, predominantly of many Blacks from the South, specifically my parents' homes, which were both from Virginia. Okay. They came to be there. And I said, well, I had connections, and my father was like a townspoken. I'll get into that too, but. Okay. All right. We all got together.
Okay, excellent. So tell us, how did you decide to become a member of Alpha Phi Alpha?
Good question. And I say it wasn't really a conscious decision up front, because you see, my communities were against Stilton, but shortly after, by then when I was in the third grade, my parents decided we were going to move. Initially, we moved, the entire time in Stilton, we really felt like it was just a whole collection of communities. You go down to there were so many churches for some reason, many bars, many liquor stores. But more you can say where people congregate and whatnot, but everything was pretty much set to blue collar workers, primarily coming from the steel mills. And as such, we got a chance to see different things. But I didn't have any exposure to college life per se. But I did know, I lucked out. I say, well, now I'm going to start off in parochial school. I did my first. I was raised in the church. My parents don't do things partly; they do everything fully. We became intimate parts of the community. Well, most of the churches that we went to, St. James and then St. John's, were all white. But I didn't recognize that. I did recognize that we were very diverse communities. We were both ethnic. We had a number of Polacks and whatnot. Well, St. John's was actually in Inhofe, Pennsylvania. Okay. Inhofe is a small German community. Go to the area. All our neighbors are mostly German and whatnot. Okay. But it turns out that when you each went to these little neighborhoods, they were all of a different ethnic. So there were Croatians and Slovakians and Armenians and Russians and Jews, and that was all in our parish, in our churches. And they actually I had no real recollection of racial issues throughout my parochial elementary times. But I was fully aware that I wasn't like anyone else. The color did make a difference, but only because I could see I was different, and I would be in their homes. I would go to, but I came up with a set of rules. We had all kinds of rules. My father was ex-military, and he was always on the forefront. Well, going to school, we always wore suits. That was, but that was only because in the Black community back in the day, back in the 50s and 60s, men, you didn't go out in public unless you had your shirt tie on. You see all the pictures when
I've seen photos like that.
Dressed, and I didn't understand it, but I do know that was a rule. So, and so even when I went to St. John's and I started down in third grade, we always had a shirt and tie on. The other kids may be very different, but for the most part, even they were always clean. We couldn't wear jeans.
Okay, that was
I wear jeans. Sneakers. You could wear tennis shoes. We call them sneakers, and then they started calling them tennis shoes and all. But we couldn't do that to school. After school, so you change clothes. Well, my father never did. Every time he would go to work, and he had a variety of jobs, and he was always a workaholic. He always tried. He's a very diverse person. So that was my role model. If my dad could do it, I could do it. He had the mistake of saying that to him because there was always a challenge. I told them they know. Okay, so well, if you say you're so good, you could work. I worked in a steel mill. I worked construction, and all because he was able to do it, so I had to do it.
Sure.
But that's how that started out. So when I also grew up under the shadow of my brother. Again, he's 17 months older than me. I did my entire life was with him.
Sure.
To school, and well, we did. I followed him and we went to Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, church, school, everything. Well, come time for high school, graduating 8th grade out of my parochial school, they decided that I was tired of being Fabian's brother. My brother's name is Fabian. And I won't say I was really tired of being it, but every year I went, people seemed to know his name.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And my name being Charles was just another name. So every time I went somewhere and met somebody, I was always Fabian's brother. And when I graduated, when I changed grades and met the new set of teachers, it was always Fabian did this and Fabian did that. So come time 8th grade, we had a brand new high school being opened up, a public high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided, my parents let me have a choice, and I decided that I wanted to go to this brand new school because it was new labs and it's out in the country.
Okay.
We had cows in the fields and around that, but it was a brand new, newly built school with new facilities and everything. So I said I was going to go there.
Okay.
When I left,
out of your brother's shadow.
And that was not a bad thing. It's just that I was never not that individual that I wanted to be.
Right.
So sure enough, when I got there, I didn't realize it at the time, but it seemed like when I got into public schools, I was pretty much ahead of everybody, even the other white students who did not go to McDevitt, to the high school, the Catholic high school. They decided they would go over. And I was put into an accelerated section. And I didn't ever consider myself anything like that. But unfortunately, I was then at that point dedicated to being by myself. I was the only Black in my class. And that stayed that way when I went to that new public high school. Likewise, I never had my only Black teacher, which possibly a Moral, came in 10th grade.
Really?
Prof. Fryer was my world cultures teacher. And I was admiring him because he was worldly. He knew about other things. And I said, boy, I really ought to be like him, you know. And he actually was that impetus. Because again, that I never had no other. My interest was always in sciences and again in the solar section. So I didn't have any classmates in my classes. They were in the school. There were only about 20 of them in the school of 400.
Really? Not many.
Brother
Franklin, what was your teacher's name again? I want to make sure I get that.
Mr. John Shropshire.
Okay.
He was not Greek, but nonetheless, he was my debate team. He was the coach of the debate team. So that's how I got into debate.
Okay.
He was a coach of the chess team. So I said that he embodied everything beyond my father. He actually showed me that part of the world. But that only that one class, world cultures, which occurred at the time when Kennedy's assassination occurred, I was in his class. And the very next year, that spring, it was Martin Luther King's assassinated. So those were the clear connections of racial issues.
Sure.
But at that time, I also got my brother, who went to the Catholic high school, which is in Harrisburg. So that's the closest he came to commuting, and he decided to got his first car.
Okay.
My father set him up with that one. Well, I didn't get that benefit. I said, well, I take the school bus, and that was that benefit. But Mr. Shropshire, I was 10th grade, and that again, didn't ever occur. But it was also, I was in the college prep enrollment. Okay. Which was an elite section of the school. We didn't do a section, so I knew all the kids. I was, especially the Blacks. We did that together. But I was used to being in a predominantly white environment, so that was it never really came to the issue. But going to Harrisburg in 1964, I got involved with the NAACP.
Okay.
So I joined the NAACP Youth Council. The very next year, I was elected the vice president of the NAACP Council. And my other friend, who was actually a female in this public schools. She actually turned out to be the president. So we banded together, and that's when I started my travel. I first came down to the NAACP convention in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
That opened up the world, but I said that was
Sure.
just a small opening to the world of what other people outside. We came down to Baltimore and the youth council and learned that life was kind of strange in Baltimore. Baltimore was very strange, and strange in that Black folks had a place. I was used to that concept. I mean, my parents are from Virginia.
Okay.
Both sides of the Shenandoah. On the eastern side was my mother's family in a little place called Brightwood, Virginia, outside of Culpeper.
Okay. All right.
My father's side is on the other side of the Shenandoah Valley, and that was in Fauquier County, which was Front Royal. He was from Happy Creek.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with that area.
Yeah. So that plays a lot into my history. We'll get to that possibly a little bit later here.
Okay.
But in 1965, graduating high school, I immediately took the opportunity to find a college and go to a college. Oh, before I get to that, I should mention my guidance counselor seeing me in high school. Unfortunately, she delayed calling me down to the office because she really didn't have, I guess she didn't have anything said to her. Finally, after all the other kids were getting their college applications in, I was wondering why I hadn't heard anything from her. So I sought it out. And turns out she says, "Oh yeah, I'm ready for you. You can come in." And we sat down and talked. She says, "But I see where you're an excellent student. We want to do this for you, but I think a career suited for you would be as a chef. We have a trade school. I had an interest in everything, but I even participated in the science fairs and whatnot. But she had opportunity to know me better. But she actually had career goals in mind for me. She says, "Well, no, we have a trade school or sister school. We have a trades opportunities, and I can get you into the classroom." But he says, "Well, I don't want to be a chef. I think I want to be." So, and that was the full extent of guidance counseling.
Really?
But
really on your own.
I kept with the church, even though I went to public school. I stayed active in my church, and my nuns, who really, again, we're used to living by rules and whatnot. We had many rules. The sun sets, street lights come on, you're in the house. Chores to do, you weren't allowed to leave the house until 12 o'clock and on any given day, because you have your chores to do, and anybody coming to can't visit you until after 12 o'clock. Well, the neighbors right next door, it turned out to be a Black family, and they said, "So it's unreasonable that you should have all these rules." I said, "Well, this has always been, so we follow rules." My father lived by rules, and he had to make your bed before you come out to bed in the morning. That was all. It was a very regimented. I can look back on it fondly now, but you did what you had to do, and that was what we had to do. Well, part of it was there was never any question in my mind that we were going to go to college, and that they found that role for me.
Got it. Okay.
As you can see, I can go on talking, but I
love got it. Yeah, I want to find out about. Okay, so you decided on, not
okay. When I got to college at Duquesne University, my nun is the one that recommended I go to Duquesne University. I didn't think about it originally, and she said, "Well, go. We have a school pharmacy there, and we want you to go there." So I applied, and man, we got in. Turns out that's where she went to school.
Okay.
Sister Georgine. Sister Lawrence is the one that actually had gone there. And she apparently had several discussions with the school, with Duquesne, with the priest, the Benedictine priest there. And they had a role for me planned as soon as I got to campus. They says, "Well, they wanted, their plan was that I was going to be a priest."
Oh, really?
Now, this was in 1965.
Okay.
64, The Lilies of the Field came out, Sidney Poitier movie.
Okay, sure.
If you haven't seen it,
I
it was
have.
for Black folks, that was a very much introduction to the issue of Black folks in the North. That was the issue that the Black actor who wasn't, and there weren't, few and far between, played a role in the world. And the priest picked up on that too. And they said, well, we have missionary work, it's all planned for you. I says, well, I don't, it was in South America. And I don't see any plan for that. And this is all in the first week or two.
Okay.
On campus. And I said, so I can see that as a possibility. I would first to get a degree in something and then go back. But I didn't see the chance of being a priest. But it was 65 was an eye-opening time. Getting away from home was one that was I never really was a person to get homesick. I love to travel. I love to go things. I always get actively involved in everything. But I didn't see a possibility of my going. There's plenty of work to do in the South, in the South.
Sure.
If I want to do any kind of missionary work, they didn't want to hear it. But anyway, they said, well, just get acclimated on campus and see how that works out. I was the only one in the sciences. That turns out there's only like 20 Blacks in the school, Duquesne University.
And I assume your brother did not go there?
Huh?
Your brother
no,
did
my
not
my brother
went
to the Ohio State.
Okay, got it.
But he went to he went out there after I went to Duquesne and went away to school. He stayed in school in Harrisburg Area Community College. But by that time we were definitively separate. Sure. He was from a Catholic, and he stayed, but I went away to college first, to college, and he followed closely behind. No, he did not go, and I say, but I found myself in a city. I had no problem being around predominantly white institution staff, classmates, getting into the study groups. But one of the tasks that the priest decided I should do is tutor, since I was doing so well in math. Okay. So they said, well, look, we have this opportunity. I want you to go at this Catholic school up in Oakland, which is Pitt's campus is 4 miles up the road in Oakland. And that's where I went to tutor. Okay. Elementary school, 7th and 8th graders in math. Okay. I walk into the room, and yes, predominantly it's all mostly white kids around, but there's there were 4 African American colleges, as we call them. And lo and behold, 2 of them are engineers, 2 of them are pre-med. And turns out they were all from a fraternity house up the street. Okay. Called the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity. Okay. 216 Duncy Street. Okay. And now, again, this is 1965. I'm a freshman on campus. Probably about my first month in school. We were being on Duquesne's campus. We were being, college life. With fraternities and sororities were pretty much a focal point for development. But we were told that we cannot even think about it as freshmen. You cannot be rushed, as they called it. You could not be approached by the fraternities and sororities until your sophomore year, your second year. Also, they don't encourage you to go to any of their parties and get-togethers. And that was probably a rule that was told to me, but I didn't pay any attention because I didn't see the issue. But here I am in tutoring session, and these brothers, these 4 African Americans were getting together, and they said, it wasn't about partying. They were there for teaching and scholarly people. easily could be identified as being role models. And I says, well, yeah, I'll go up and visit and see what it is. They just said it's just up the street. It's up a steep hill.
Okay.
We went up there and go to the house. And they said, look, we're getting ready to start another line. I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, we're getting ready to start a pledge group.
Mm-hmm.
So you can join us on a more religious basis. I says, okay, it's all about. I had no clue what it was about, but I got online. This was in October. I got online, and it says, well, you got to study this and do these tasks. No problem rules.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I got introduced to history.
And that was October 65.
Was formed, and the year wasn't that significant to me, but it was back in the early 1900s at a white school by a group of men who felt isolated and didn't have a part of the community, and they had study groups, but they weren't being invited to join any other study groups. Unlike my group, mine were inviting me and join in and whatnot. And I said, okay, that sounds a lot like my issue. Is this, well, darn, there's a reason why. And again, we would in the 60s, that was part of the integration move. So we were not encouraged to get together, but there were so few of us on campus that I knew all 10 or 12 of them. They tend to congregate down in Rockwell Hall at the lunchtime. And this, again, all in the first 2 months of being on campus.
Got it.
I learned about them. I was saying, oh yeah, there were no one else. Again, it just, I was 10 blacks that I got. Turns out one of the blacks that were down there, well, two of them decided to get into the same pledge group. Omicron chapter, University of Pittsburgh, was at that time pretty much the city chapter. Got it. The area, the regional chapter. So lo and behold, there was a brother. Well, again, two of them there. I didn't meet them. There was one brother who was in the School of Business, and he didn't have much to do with this social group. But there was a difference in the feeling when you were around others of like race. And these were all college students. So how bad can it be? We would look forward to. And I never played cards. We were bid whist. And it was very easy to get caught up in it. But again, my class, none of them were in science classes. I could only see them whenever I was in between classes and come down off again. But that's when I met my two line brothers from Duquesne University, also on this line. So we started in October.
Got it. Now, how large was your line? How many other line brothers were there?
Well, there were 8 of us to start with. Actually, there was a third one who got online with me. He was a math major, and only rarely did he stop into the Rockwell Hall to the shop. But the blacks congregated together at a table. All the rest of the place was all there, but we would be at the table, and there were some of them that tended to be there at the table. Well, Bob, one of my line, Bob West, tended to be one of them who was always there and played a mean game. It was a tough. And the other one, Bob Mentor, also will come down into that group, and not only did I get to know them, but I really didn't get to know them until we came up to pledge classes in the Sphinx Club at the Alpha House, and that was an event. Well, that was one of my first instances of leaving campus and going again. Pittsburgh's a large city, And the University of Pittsburgh only 6 miles down the road, up the road, off the main road, same road. There's a lot in my history I could go into.
Okay,
That again.
that's great.
But
So,
nonetheless, that was the beginning of it. We got a large that Sphinx Club, and the three brothers from my three on my line came from Geneva College, which was probably about 60 miles outside of Pittsburgh to the west.
They traveled a long way.
Well, there was one brother from in the chapter, John Nelson, who actually recruited them. So lo and behold, they came together, and so that was 3 from Duquesne, 3 from Geneva College, and 1 from Pitt, Harry Scott.
Okay.
But I didn't meet him until online.
Okay, got it. So what year did you cross?
So on December the 22nd, 1965.
Okay, got it. Okay, all right.
That's my benefit of this.
Okay, is that 65 on your shoulder? There you go. Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah.
December 1965.
Into Omicron chapter.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So what are some of your best memories as a college brother?
It's pretty much centered on the life and times of being at that frat house. Only, well, again, we 4 of the Divine Nine. I didn't know anything about that. There was a Panhellenic Council, and again, but the Alphas were principal main on campus, and they were. If there was a black leader, and not just amongst the blacks, but leaders on campus wide, they were all Alphas, every one of them, but the Qs were there, and they were by their name and by their nature all partiers. The Kappas were there, who partied. The AKs were there, and the Deltas. And that was the gist of it. But we did have a Panhellenic Council. But the winner of the Greek festival, the Greek Sing, for the 2 years prior, 64, 65, and 66, the leader, the winner of the Greek week competition were always Alpha Phi Alpha. Okay, got it. So you talk about fraternal spirit and bonding and whatnot. That's exactly what we had at the house. And the fact that not only were they leaders, they were all known in the communities. And the Hill District was at the top of the hill, and Homewood District is out further to the east. But everywhere there was a center of Black community activity, the Alphas were the lead. So nice. We came to be known to our Alpha Omicron Lambda, which was the graduate chapter, who also had a house. Up on the hill. So between our times of gathering, and I was, clearly dedicated student, had to stay on campus, but every chance I got, I didn't mention the fact that I went to school knowing that the city is big and I wanted to see much of it. I went to school with a motorcycle. Oh, really? Okay. Wow. So I roam a lot. So I like to change neighborhoods and whatnot. Well, lo and behold, that was an excuse. And I kept saying, well, let me venture onto campus. So they came to know me by my motorcycle after I pledged. Okay. Because I had my A5 markings on it. And nice. Many of the white person would ask me, what's this all about? Sure. Well, if you were in the Black community, you knew what it was about because the Alphas were usually the lead of it. So not only was it the NAACP and UBAC, but on campus, the activity at that time in 68, 69, was the formation of the Black Action Society at Pitt. Well, I was earmarked to be a part of that. I was actively involved with it, but I did my 2 years of pre-pharmacy at Duquesne University, and I decided, well, hey, they have a school of pharmacy up there. Like I said, Pennsylvania is unique. They have 4 schools of pharmacy. So why didn't I consider this the first one? But now, as I thought about it, but in 1966, 67, the University of Pittsburgh became a state school.
Okay.
So their tuition dropped from $2,800 down per semester to $500
Oh,
a
boy.
year. Well, I'm down at Duquesne University at $1,400 tuition per semester. And in 68, 67, 68, I said, well, it's time to make a change.
Sure. Makes sense. Yeah. And you're at Pittsburgh a lot anyway. Okay.
Well, again, it's only 6 miles down the road, so it's not like, but it was a whole different world for me. And I was tending to spend a lot of time there. So I said, that's what I was going to do.
Okay.
Well,
so you transferred.
I had gotten my draft notice. Again, as a student, I had my 2S deferment. 65, 66, 67. I actually got 4 greetings letters because that was the 60s were really special to start, but that was the height of the war. 68 was the high point of the Vietnam War. So I didn't look for it. I had a deferment, so I had no problem. But they were tested every spring. I would get a letter of induction. For induction. I said, no, hold on, I still have my 2S deferment. Well, it turns out my draft board was very active. And they had me earmarked. But when I guess my brother, the older brother, he got his draft notice in 67. So he got drafted, again, changing schools, going from his Harrisburg Community College. He was going to go at his time. He got drafted and went in. I said, well, that's good. That's good. He went in within 2 months of his being inducted, drafted. He decided, he took the offer. They offered him the possibility of going to officers candidate school.
Okay.
And get his second lieutenant ranking. Here's a brother who, when he got drafted, he already had a car. He got a 1966 Mustang. He was going to go to Canada.
Oh, really?
Well, my father being ex-military, and again, we grew up regimented. And it wasn't about fear of the military. We were actually scared. He thought that was the best thing is going into the military. His favorite was he was going to go to Canada. So the week before he actually went in, he finally broke down and decided he was going to go take his induction. He went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for basic training. I says, well, I'm sorry for him, but 67, that was time for me to change school. So that's when I put in my notice to go into Pitt. Okay. But, my school got very angry with me. They felt they nurtured me this far to King University. So as soon as I put in my notice of transfer, they decided they were going to drop me from the rolls. So in 67, December 67, when I went to Christmas break, they decided that I did an extra semester to get to then, and then I was gonna. I had 2 weeks before I was starting Pitt. It was on the trimester system, where Duquesne was on a semester system. Between two, again, they dropped me on a roll. They had 3 weeks to get me in, 3 weeks a window to get me in, and that I got my 4th draft notice in that 2 weeks. 2 weeks into it, I got my draft notice saying that I was due to report in May 68 into the Army. So I was drafted, and I wasn't here in the I was at that time. My brother was just going to Vietnam. I said, well, at least that's cool, but at least it wasn't going to be a good thing. But yeah, I had to take the draft. I finished the trimester and went in.
So you had to go into the Army.
I wasn't going to change. You're going to offer me whatever you want, and I stuck by that. I did my 2 years in the Army. I did my first year, actually, after completing AIT. basic training. They sent me to Fort Sam Houston to be trained as a medic.
Okay.
And even my time in basic, I was always in a leadership role.
Okay,
So
got it.
when I went to Fort Sam, they put me in a leadership role. So before I could start my advanced training, I had to go to leadership training. But they offered me, I had these several opportunities, but I could enlist and get my commission right then and there as a first lieutenant, or and go with the criminal investigator in it, or they could find a post for me as an officer. But no, I'm going to do my 2 years and I'm done.
Okay.
I was not, that was a dark period of time. I was not happy about being in the Army.
Oh, sure, especially given the circumstances how you got in. Okay, so you're in the Army for 2 years.
I always was. I was raised in the military fashion.
Right.
I was always knew that there was opportunities there. I was getting a chance to see the world, as I was always promoted by my father and many of those again. But yes, I found going in on again. I did through basic. I went through Fort Sam to train. Well, it turns out I spend most of my time work in my later high school years and whatnot in pharmacies or in hospitals. My father worked in a hospital. He was a pathologist, and as a result, I kind of picked up on much of. And I went through several first aid courses as a scout, and so I knew a lot about medicine and train. So they earmarked me to teach medics at Fort Sam. Taking me out of my pre-pharmacy. I didn't have that much, but I had work experience in pharmacy. So they said, well, this is all good. So that's where I stayed at Fort Sam until March of 68. Okay. 69.
Is that when you got out?
That's when I went to Vietnam.
Okay. Oh, you went to Vietnam. Okay. Oh, okay. Wow.
I did my year in Vietnam. At first, I was teaching medics, and then medics that I trained were ones I met when I went to Vietnam. But it was not a good time. It was. I fully did not expect that I would be returning going to Vietnam. Just the luck of the draw. And of the few blacks that were drafted, my hometown, several did not return. But again, I wasn't defeated. It's just that I knew I had an objective. I was going to do my time in the military, and I was going to come back and go right back to school. And yeah, my place was there in school. So 69 to 70, I was in Vietnam. Okay. Initially in the field as a combat medic, and then out in the back in the rear as a 91 Bravo, not Charlie, as in the aid station. Okay, got it. Okay, so you get out of Vietnam, you come back to Pitt to finish. First thing when I came back, I got back in March. Went back to a trimester at Pitt, and then started right into pharmacy school in 69. Okay. Graduated pharmacy school in 73. Interesting enough, when I got back, pharmacy school was up on the hill. I mean, the frat house is up on the hill, but on that same hill, it was called Cardiac Hill. I didn't realize that until I got into that. But it was a steep hill, and all the medical institutions were all up on that hill. And there was very little instances or opportunities for me while in pharmacy school to go down on campus. And the frat house that was previously up on top of that hill was closed. So I didn't have much to do with Alpha beyond going to a couple grad chapter meetings at Alpha Omicron Lambda, which is again right up there on the hill. And so Alpha was in my life, but not that great a part of life. But again, I heard your original question. Yes, there were only 4 frats and fraternities. I didn't have much in the way of a decision point to make. Fraternities and sororities were not prominent in my earlier life
Sure.
in Harrisburg. I only remember my father having us to be involved with the Delta Cotillion, and the Qs had a fraternity house in Harrisburg. Still do have. But other than that, that was my only exposure to Black Greek organizations. But it's very true that after I got out and after school and after graduate school, community life was really important. I was much appreciative of the fact that everything we did in the frat, we partied hard at the Alpha House. It was known citywide for our parties. But I chose to live in the frat house my last years at Duquesne.
Good.
And that was the fondest of memories. I mean, the brothers who were there, the two med students lived right around the corner. They were in their med school years right then. Okay. But the community action was the most important part. In fact, many of the brothers, most of the African American, political science was the major choice for most of them. Most predominantly of the African Americans on campus. So many of them are now lawyers. Many of them now are, and those who aren't are community activists. And the fraternities and sororities all were dedicated to it. The white fraternities and sororities on this, and that's what's most prominent to me right now. When you go into any community we go into, it makes sense that you know of the AKAs and the alphas and whatnot, and that's how my life here in Columbia is. But it's everywhere. I mean, it literally is everywhere. The alphas always had a social, community-oriented implementation or activity. And most of the leaders were good.
Indeed. So you mentioned Columbia. How did you happen to come to the Columbia, Maryland area?
Well, I did Pitt. I did my pharmacy school year and graduated in '73. I stayed in Pittsburgh. I love being a student. I mean, it embodied all the things that I wanted to do. And it was, well, I stayed for graduate school. I did my 3 years as a PhD candidate for biochemical pharmacology. Biochemical was my secondary choice because when I got accepted into the school, the dean and were cardiac pharmacy. Well, he decided when I started grad school in '73 that he was going to take a deanship down at the University of Houston, and he took his senior students with him. But we underlings, my first year, we had to choose an alternative major. He took the whole department. He took all the cardiology, all that were upperclassmen with him. So that's how I got into biochemical pharmacology. I love chemistry, and it all panned out well. I'm also a workaholic, even then. And I cause out the work. As a pharmacist, I didn't stop being, I was the only pharmacist in grad school.
Oh, really?
In my department. The rest of them were all science majors or whatnot. But I had opportunities after coming coming back from Vietnam. Pharmacy school at Pitt they embraced me because one, I had more experience than anyone, even than much of the teachers, exposure to real life medicine.
Right.
And that carried over to my being in leadership roles in school. And then I also was a leader in my fraternity, but a chapter president. And the new brothers that I just brought into the chapter, they both came under my tutelage.
Okay, nice. Okay.
Chapter president. So the brother Fletcher Hardiman and Ed Jackson, who just joined us.
Sure.
They both were my initiates.
Okay, that's great.
And that's just a coincidence, but nonetheless, that's how that worked out.
Got it. Okay.
But again, that same applied all the way through pharmacy school. And as a grad school, I had opportunities that was on scholarship, GI Bill. So money was never an issue in grad school. And that it went from there.
Okay, got it. Okay. So we're talking about how you ended up in, how you came to come to Columbia, Maryland.
Okay, well, 1151. When the opportunity presented itself, I took the opportunity to. I was making more money than all the PhD, the doctors in the program, doing part-time pharmacy. So I worked community pharmacy. I was a student, and in grad school, I got bitten by another alternative lifestyle, and that was the implementation of computers. So the school, they gave me the opportunity, as I had a language requirement, and the principal language of suggestion was German. And I didn't have anything against it. I just didn't understand why I would want to learn German. Well, that year, 73, they decided they would allow computer science or computer languages be an alternative.
Okay.
I took them up on it. So I started going into computer science and as a sidelight in grad school while I had my courses. And in the art course, all my classes at that end, the first 2 years was in the med school. So that we were all together, but nonetheless, the computers were turned out. I just totally fascinated. I figured this language, I learned COBOL, basic COBOL, and I said, well, look, computers in those days was something a little bit different. You had to punch everything out on the key punch.
Yeah, I remember seeing those. Sure.
And then you get a chance. You have to run your cards to see if your program worked. Well, the only time to do that was at nighttime. Well, I went to school all day, worked as a pharmacist part-time. I put at least 20 hours a week in as a pharmacist in the retail pharmacies communities, and then worked on my computer programs, which I found that it was easiest to do because you had to do it all timeshare. You had to sign up for your time slots. I noticed that the 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning was always an open time slot. So I would leave work, and I was married and had a child. I would just stop home and go back, run my deck. If it didn't run, the normal course of things was to find get all your do your key punch in the early hours. Wait, get to run your time, your cards, your deck through. If it didn't work, you get a chance to debug it a little bit, but you had to do it. Go back, reprogram, put your deck in. Well, I could do more of that. I could run my deck 2 or 3 times in the time that nobody wanted to be in the computer.
Okay, sure.
It's always booked. So that's how I spent my nights. Then go back to class. Well, that didn't pan out, but like I said, it didn't pan out, and that I didn't go tired, but I was getting used to the 4 and 5 hours of sleep a night. That's all I learned to thrive with that, or function with that, and that's how it worked, and that stayed with me all the way through most of my career here in Columbia. Anyway, I left grad school, went on with the firm who had a new concept going on there, which is essentially called counter detailing. We would go in and pharmacies. The pharmacy science at the time was the companies hired pharmacists and other salespeople to talk to the doctors, sell their products to the doctors, and they call that detailing. You go ahead and give the doctors what was good about this drug and how it was, the alternative. So obviously, it was the corporate world, the approach of it. Their interest is making a profit, obviously. Sure. It's more severe now than it was then, but even so, that was the reason of it. Well, their forces were called detailers. Well, there's a new company out of California who was starting up, who was taking the and said, well, we got to start giving the doctors the whole story, the counter details, of why this drug was why you always want to go with the less expensive item, why you always didn't buy the okey doke details that the salesmen were giving the doctors. Hire pharmacists and let them counter detail.
Okay.
Well, I've learned then that it was very true that doctors tend to listen to you if you come at them clinically, if you come at them in a term where you can have a conversation that may fit in with their role. So rather than the razzle and dazzle of what a drug can do and how the detailers were, it was a lot easier to counter detail. But you had to select your targets. Well, the company that was called Paid Prescriptions.
Okay.
They had a commercial side where they were doing third-party claims management. So all the state government programs were managed by these organizations, third-party claims management. We still have third-party claims managers. They actually are the ones who process prescriptions to the insurances now.
Okay.
So that's where they went after they found out that detailing wasn't their direction. But the companies continue, but detailing is nowhere near. I mean, it used to be then if you go in and visit a doctor's office and you bought them a pen and pencil set or a gift set or this is what the doctors remembered. One of the bigger companies, Eli Lilly, they go in and give the doctor their first black bag, because doctors carry black bags.
Okay, sure.
You get a fully equipped black bag for Eli Lilly. You remember that?
Sure.
So it was difficult to counter detail against them. The Eli Lillys, the Merck Sharp Domes, the Hoffman Roche. They all had detail forces, and you were doing this job to counter detail. We weren't popular amongst the detail, but they recognized we embodied a model that made more sense to them. So they started hiring pharmacists.
Okay.
Well, I took the job right out of grad school I did not get my doctorate. I stopped after 3 years. They were telling me I needed to change my research. And so this is not going to work out. I already give me 3 years. Just go on. And I came out making twice as much as they were getting as college professors, and that was their aspiration. And you with your doctor, you could go on with the drug company, or you could actually go into education. Well, I was loving education in school, so no, I said, let's try that, and it worked. And I flourished in Pennsylvania for a year. And they decided they're going to give me an upgrade. I was a director of professional services for paid prescriptions in Harrisburg, and then I covered mostly the Western Pennsylvania. They said, well, look, we got this opportunity for a director of professional services down in Florida. I said, well, we'll take it down there. That's where I went down there.
Okay.
So that was in 76, late 76, 77. We went down there. 78 in Jacksonville, Florida, working for paid prescriptions, and then that were bought out by EDS Federal, and EDS, the National Electronic Data Systems.
Okay, sure, yeah.
They saw the role was being, so we came into the company, and they hired me on as the level of one of their main roles were they trained systems engineers or SEs. Well, to be an EDS trained system engineer was phenomenal, but I was being paid the same as what they were getting, and that didn't fly well. But nonetheless, EDS lost the contract for Medicaid management of claims processing, and we were only an auxiliary group to them. So and I took a job with McGaw Laboratories, who wanted to move me back up to Washington, D.C. area.
Okay, got it.
Again, I was used to talking as a detailer. counter detailer. I was already known to go into offices, but they would do claims processing, and they had this humongous database of claim information that came into them because the pharmacies were looking to get paid. They filled the prescriptions, submitted the claim to the claim processor. The claim processor entered it, and it was all entered in their computer. And we got a humongous database, or I didn't know what data mining was, and it was not even the subject then. But the computers was doing it. And since I had an interest in computers, I even had access to my own mini computer.
Okay.
Which minis were the step down to having what you had within your walls. With the other, companies had to buy time on a timeshare on mainframes, which were at major corporations. The minor corporations, and that's how EDS came to be. They were EDS, an IBM organization. They did the programming for IBM.
Okay.
Well,
Got it.
They had a mini, and I got a chance to work it, and after hours, once again, it was essentially my computer. If I can write and modify or adjust the program, and the programs came from California, it's like, okay, we'll see what more we could do with this. So we got peer review organizations. We banded together. My role was to actually chair the peer review committees throughout the state of Florida. So my team of pharmacists, and I had 6 of them, covered the entire state, and I would actually coordinate their movements around and visit them and teach at their site. So again, I was used to being around doctors around and conversing with them on a one-to-one level. So it fit right in. They said, okay, well, McGaw is a history in itself. They moved me to Washington, D.C.
Okay.
I came to Washington State and moved immediately to Columbia. This is Columbia in 1980. Yes,
okay.
Columbia 1980 was what, 5 years into their origin, but it was the place to be. I mean, I have gone from being in Florida, which are being around military bases,
right,
down in Mayport, being around youth. But nonetheless, most of them were all military and whatnot. Coming to Columbia, I was bound youth. We didn't even have, it was both upwardly mobile, always. Everything was upwardly mobile, including the blacks.
Yes, indeed.
There's a long story about the South, but we're not going into that. We know the history and derivation, and especially Florida and the South.
Got it. Okay. Sure.
This was a world of this. Again, I thank God to this day, my good fortune to move to Columbia. Originally in Wild Lake, and after being there for 4 years, we decided we'd buy this house here in Long Beach.
Okay, nice. So how did you get connected with Kappa Phi Lambda?
That's what I came here, and in 1981, again, everything it was an upwardly mobile community. There was no okie doke. There was no you can't even say it was blue collar, even though there was a large segment of blue collar. These were just upwardly mobile, whites, blacks, everything, and diversity was built in. This was a mecca, and it was the first school. My daughter, we kept her in private school the entire we were down in Florida. Came here, and we heard about the school system here, and says, "Well, let's give it a try." My daughter had a fit. She said, "You were gonna put me in a public school, because she's used to going to either Catholic school or private Christian school." But she came up here, and I say, she went to Wild Lake High School. Wild Lake Middle and Wild Lake High School, and it fit right in. Loved it, and again, so all my kids have all are a product of the Howard County school system. I have 4 kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Tell us about
the first year of getting to Columbia. Back in the day, I think it was still in the growth phase for Columbia. But one of the things they did was have the lakefront Columbia party. I mean, we did block parties. I mean, I grew up in communities, especially in Stilton, and I visited Stilton all the time. We had an annual block party, Sometimes it was actually twice. I would always go back to my original home. So I knew everybody on the street and the family stuff. Well, likewise, I got to Columbia, and lo and behold, we had community parties, block parties. So this is a novel concept. This is great. And the community would get together. But then on top of that, they would have an annual gathering down at the lakefront. I go down there in 1981. I go to and I see these brothers. The lakefront down by Kilimanjaro Lake, it was completely banded all around by the lakefront. One of the booths down at the bottom was an Alpha Phi Alpha booth. Nice. I don't know if there are other frats and sororities were there or not. The AKs were the first in town, and I don't think they, again, and the Qs were. I do know that the Alphas were the first one, most prominent booth, and that's the time when I met Brother Ken Jennings. Okay. And Brother, I believe it was Brother Alexander, and Brother Freeman Sands, and Brother. There were four of them that were notable. Well, Ken was the retention. I never get. All the times from the time I came out of the military to then, did I have any thought about fraternity and sorority? Down in Florida, I had some thought about it, but that was another issue altogether. But that was associated with Jacksonville, and my best friend there was a Kappa. He invited us out to Florida A&M's campus. So, and again, like I said, I love campus visits. As a brother, that's always a good thing. I got to know I was an Alpha, and they got to know me there. Sure. Okay, got it. But again, the Kappa, they maintain a booth. I remember they sold beer, and they had a roulette wheel. It was definitely it was a highlight of my time. I was walking, and my daughter got the chance to recognize that people do band together. And Columbia was, much to my upbringing, was very diverse, very open. We didn't. I don't remember any difficulties whatsoever in that. Yeah, that's when I got in. But I said, well, look, that was a period of time when I was all about my career and career development and my family. And I gave some thought to joining the fraternity, but it never was that significant. Right. Got it. I came to join the chapter in 2006. I went to the Washington D.C. Centennial. Okay. Nice. And I said, well, this is a great show. Because again, it was a sea of black and gold, and it was just like old times. Everyone was dressed, and if they weren't dressed, they go. This sweater that you see me wearing, this I acquired in '66 on one of my trips I didn't even go into this, but on one of my trips down to Howard University. Right, nice. That's they had the Guild was a shop, and I put my order in. I didn't get it till '67. Okay, it's in beautiful shape. Yeah. Well, again, it was sounding in good shape, but the thing when I left, it was spring and summer and '67. Again, that was when I transferred over to Pitt and got drafted. So I never really got a chance to wear it. Sure. So yeah, it's beautiful. It is wonderful. Let's mention this one. That was significant. When I went to Pittsburgh in '65, at that time I was only known as Charles Franklin. Everybody knew me as Charlie Franklin. But in Pittsburgh, they were all meeting me for the first time. One of them, I told him my name was Charles. One of the frat brothers. Right. And he says, well, Chuck, how you doing? I said, okay. So then I stuck. So every time, and thereafter in Pittsburgh, everybody who knows me knew me as Chuck, including my wife. I met her 2 years later, and she was. So your frat brother changed your name, basically. I gave you the nickname. Now, when I wear this, as soon as I graduated, we left in 76 and went to Florida. On that move to Florida, that was in November. I remember going to the Florida Georgia game. That was a big to do, and that was the weekend we were down there house hunting. So the company put me. I love corporate life, man. I go and travel much and whatnot. I got to take my wife and all, but that was one of the first things. And I got there. They too adopted me as Chuck Franklin.
Okay.
On the non-professional side, and just enough. If I was at work, I was Charles Franklin.
Sure. Got it.
Okay. So they know me down there in Chuck.
Got it. Let's talk a bit more about your involvement with Kappa Phi Lambda. So tell us about various.
When I got here, and I was recruited. I had Ken's number for reclamation, but I didn't follow through until 06. When I went down to the convention, that was the time when I felt that spirit hit me. So in 2007, I joined Alpha, but at that time the general organization. But I said, well, let me get you a work with the chapter, and I'll get back with you. So I had several invites, and Norris Jennings, yet another Jennings. Norris Jennings picked up on me as a recruiter reclamation, and he invited me to the chapter meeting and whatnot. And lo and behold, I said, well, this was a fantastic. I mean, I've been to several other chapters, usually on a visit. But I got down there, not only was that brotherhood, that kindred spirit was in fact, but I was meeting phenomenal leaders, people who are it was seem like, wow, this is the place to be. I mean, so in 08, I joined and KPL and all that shit, and I went ahead and paid for it. I said, it's another long story, but nonetheless, I ended up. I said, well, look, not only am I going to join, I'm tired of paying this $150. It was $150, and I think it was fee, annual dues, grand tax, and now you're going to ask me for chapter dues. I said, well, let me just go ahead and get my life membership.
Okay.
So I've been a life member since 08. 12003 is my life membership.
Okay, so you became a life member in 08. You told me before, I just want to catch on video some of the roles that you've held within Kappa Phi Lambda.
Okay, well, what happened is, as soon as I got active in the chapter, that was in 08, turned out to be Brother Harry Evans' third term as a chapter president. I was totally enthralled with Harry Evans as a brother to start with. I mean, this was a dynamic individual. He was literally on the top of my fan list. But not only that, but I served in his cabinet as associate editor of Sphinx.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And that was in April elections. In May, I was given an introduction to what it was going to, which was the last chapter meeting. So Brother Dave Campbell told me what it's supposed to be like to be the associate editor of the Sphinx. You know, I couldn't do a newsletter. At that time, I had already had experience as a public. I do many things, but I had already published a newsletter, a magazine for Black enterprise, Black ethnic collections, BEC, and I published their magazine. I was, again, heavily involved in computers, and desktop publishing was on the forefront of people's entry into it. So I had a computer, and I found out what I could do with it. Publishing was one thing. Well, I used to doing a magazine, so I said, okay, I could do a newsletter. That's no problem. And Dave Campbell gave me the scoop as to how I should do the newsletter. And Dave did a good job. He was the previous editor of Sphinx. And he said, well, he started having interviews with chapter brothers to introduce the concept of having a monthly feature of an interview of our chapter elders or older. And we were all at the same age at the same time. So I won't say elders, but nonetheless, prominent brothers in the fraternity. And I says, well, Dave, that sounds like a great idea. And I said, well, that works in well. I can do that. But Dave gave me all kinds of instructions. He gave me all his back issues. And I said, well, this will work out. Well, Harry said it doesn't have to be like it always used to be. You know, just because we are off for the summer doesn't mean we don't have our newsletter. In fact, let the newsletter be that tool that we'll use to bring the chapter together for his realm to start in September. I published a July, August, and a September, August newsletter, and that's how I got introduced to it. The July issue, I think, was 12 pages. The August issue was, and I do all the photography and the layout, and the August issue was 18 pages. Come September, in preparation for it, we had gone to a general convention. What was it? I think that was the one in San Antonio. But anyway, we got prominent. We bought copies of the newsletter with them, and other chapters kind of got the idea. Oh, we went to Eastern Regional and then the general convention. And I said, well, look, this is how newsletters can be done. And at that time, we were calling them news magazines.
Okay.
I said, well, the Sphinx is not supposed to be a magazine, just don't get kind of way. Well, I had introduced the letter from the president, which is a monthly feature, a brother timeline of the birthdays of the month. I did as a poster to the layout. I did a lot of work time. It went from a weekend task to almost a full-time job, literally. And Harry said, no, you know, just again, but he likes it. This and the other chapters are paying attention. You got to make this now win a forth. And Kappa Phi Lambda was used to being at the forefront. I mean, we had been going from chapter to year to prominent members within the chapter. KPL was a force to get, and we stood up against all of our local chapters. KPL stands out. So and Harry. So that's nothing. I mean, you can do, you know, Harry's his character. He doesn't hold back anything, and it wasn't like we're advertising or false advertising. It wasn't a chance for false advertising. We had to
highlighting what the chapter was doing.
We had to be in the forefront, and so Harry's probably and Dave, but Harry specifically was. When the newsletter was late, Harry will point out to the fact that brothers want to have the newsletter in advance. Well, I can get it on Wednesdays before the chapter meeting. I slipped to a Thursday. Harry will point out to the fact that brothers some brothers will point out the fact that, well, not everybody has mail, because publishing is a lot easier electronically than it is to print. So I would have to take orders to see how many print copies I had to put out.
Okay, nice.
That was an expensive proposition. I said, look, we got it all to be an electronic newsletter by the Martin MLK, but we're planning for the MLK. It was all done with the newsletter support.
That's great.
So I did my time with the news associated with under Harry. And then shortly after that, Norris Jennings was chapter president, and I served as his second term as his second of his terms as his vice president.
Okay, great.
And then Norris introduced me to an organization here in Columbia called the African American Community Roundtable. Because that's about the time I didn't know at the time, but he was taking sick, and he wasn't able to make all the meetings on the agenda. So it got to be an overwhelming job. So I went to the African American community. That was a formative year for the African American community, which is an organization of all the African American organizations in here in Columbia. Lo and behold, not only was the Alphas put a prominent role in there, but again, their Black leaders were there, and I got to meet all of them. Well, my time with the AACR, the African American Community Table, continues.
Okay.
But that was Norris getting on. And then after Norris was Brother John Taylor. And John's second term, I also took on the vice president role.
Okay, got it.
And that's just about the time I retired from. I didn't even mention it, but nonetheless, that's about the time I retired in 2015.
Okay, got it.
38 years at Johns Hopkins.
Okay.
All of which I was, again, work experience. I did full-time work, and I got into administration and information systems and whatnot. That was what I did mostly at Johns Hopkins as my specialty. Okay. But at the same time, I was also in organizations, serving roles, and additionally, well, that'll work.
Okay, very good. So to just two more questions. What are some of you touched on some things, but what are some of your best memories of being an Alpha?
Well, being an Omicron brother to the 60s would be primary, and that's because of the times change and getting involved. And I mean, there's so much. I learned about the world. I mean, that my days at Duquesne specifically, and my days at Pitt were eye-opening in terms of the ways of the world, different people, different cultures, different, and what it means to be in a diverse world. Yeah. But then coming to and life's experiences through employment and all, but coming to Columbia, joining KPL, getting to a chance to join, to continue my spreading out to the world. I've been on every general convention since then. I've been to most regional conventions. It was just a time for involvement. But in all of those instances, it was a time to get Alpha into the forefront. And that was easy to do in the community. So you go anywhere, and chances are you're going to find somebody, and you let them know you're an Alpha. It's golden. The frat has been, it's all about leadership roles. It's all about community activists. When you have a question, you have a query, you usually go consult an Alpha.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Now, as we know, Brother Franklin, that Alpha Phi Alpha has been around. It's the first Black Greek letter organization founded in 1906. Why do you think Alpha is still so important today?
Because it serves a leadership role. I'm not saying they're not pumping your chest. They're not stepping up to fight. This is just their nature. They're people that you find yourself in a situation. I know it helped me, but I do know that many others that they come to achieve a great knowledge. They put education in the forefront, and they mentor the community, but more specifically, other Black African American kids. It's usually never a question. It's just assumed that we will step up and do that role. And when you're looking at it, as with any organization, but again, all the organizations, there's a large membership. But in that large membership, you usually have a smaller group of active people. It seems that in KPL specifically, they all want to see that role. I know we have 120 active, financially active brothers, but financially active is only one part of it. Right. Being active is the real part of being a brother. And you can find somebody in this chapter willing to do anything, step up to any challenge. And if you want to get a task done, you go find yourself one of the brothers that usually get approached and take ours.
Yep, indeed. Yep. Well, Brother Franklin, I want to thank you for this opportunity to interview you. Your more than 50 years as a member of our fraternity, and the life experience you've had, and being a reclaimed brother, and then really stepping to the forefront once you got here in the Columbia, Maryland area. So again, I want to thank you again for your time. And it's a pleasure to hear your story.
I was wearing, it's actually warm in the house, but
okay, nice. Very good.
yes, I'm an alpha for life. That's not just part of my life membership, but it's that spirit, fraternal spirit. I mean, college days swiftly pass, imbued with memories fond. And this is a chance to actually express that. And I thank you for this opportunity.
You bet.
But at the same time, I'm a brother for life.
Absolutely. And brother, we appreciate all you've done. So many thanks.
We didn't do this in a day, but I adapt.
Okay. Yeah, very good. Thank you again. Take care, brother.
I know.